Welcome to our channel, Flight Notes Center. I'm sure as you tour the world, you've ever wondered why the runway is full of many colored lighting systems. But today our topic of the discussion is going to be about runway lighting system. And as just a matter of introduction, the purpose of the runway lighting system is basically to aid in the safe operation of aircraft. And each system is designed for a specific purpose and contributes to the ultimate objective of safety on aircraft handling. The picture to the left of the slide is basically an attractive runway with different colors which have different meanings. And we have to underscore that guidance provided by lighting system depends on three factors, namely complexity of the aerodrome layout and the instrument category of the runway. 2 is traffic volume, and 3 is weather and visibility conditions. So runway lighting system, there are different categories. For example, we have runway centerline lights. These are lights that are found in the center of the runway, and they are to provide precision approach runway category 2 or category 3, and also takeoff runway with an operating minimum below RVR of 400 meters. They are placed on the runway along the center line from the threshold to the end of the runway. Something to note, may be uniformly offset to the same side of the runway center line by not more than 60 centimeters, where it is not practicable to locate them along the center line. And these lights consist of fixed lights showing variable white from the threshold to the point 900 meters from the runway end, and alternate red lights and variable white from 900 meters to 300 meters from the runway end. And the third one, red for the last 300 meters of the runway, just to indicate to the pilot that you are approaching the end of the runway. As we continue with the runway center line, with also runway lighting, we also have the runway edge lights. The edge lights are to be provided on a runway intended for use at night, or as a precision approach runway intended for use by day and night. These lights are located along the full length of the runway in 2 parallel, uniformly spaced rows equidistant from the center line. These fixed lights showing variable white with some exceptions. And these lights shall show at all angles in azimuth necessary to provide guidance to a pilot landing or taking off in either direction. So basically, runway edge lights are just to depict the end of the runway, are placed on the edge of the runway, and they are supposed to depict the length and the landing area available for pilot taking off or landing. Runway end lights. These are basically red lights. They are provided on a runway equipped with edge lights, and they are placed at right angles to the runway axis as near to the end of the runway as possible. They are fixed unidirectional lights showing red in the direction of the runway. So these are basically red lights at the end of the runway length. Stopway lights. Stopway lights are provided on a runway intended for use at night, and they're located along the full length of the stopway in 2 parallel rows equidistant from the center line and coincident with the rows of the runway edge lights. They extend across the end of the stopway at right angles to the stopway axis as near to the stopway as possible. You can check on the picture on the left side that depicts the stopway lights. And also these lights are unidirectional, showing red in the direction of the runway. Runway threshold light. These are lights basically placed on the threshold of the runway, just before the piano keys. They are placed at right angles to the runway axis as near to the extremity of the runway as possible. Number of lights depend on category of the runway, and they are fixed unidirectional lights showing green in the direction of approach to the runway. Point note here is that the runway depicting the threshold of the runway are the lights depicting the threshold of the runway are green, and the lights depicting the end of the runway are red, and they are unidirectional. What I mean unidirectional is depending on the direction you're coming from, the lights will change from green to red, and they will show the threshold and the end of the runway. Point note, when a threshold is displaced from the extremity of the runway, threshold lights shall be placed in a row at right angles to the runway axis at the displaced threshold. A displaced threshold just means that there's part of the runway that is not being used from the point it starts to maybe around 50 meters into the runway. This is what we mean by the displaced threshold. And this is as shown in the diagram, the picture below. Runway threshold identification lights. These identify position of the threshold. They are flashing white lights with a flash frequency of between 60 to 120 per minute, visible only in the direction of approach to the runway. So these lights are can only be seen from the direction of the approach. And another lighting that we have here is threshold wing bar lights, which are provided on an instrument or non-precision approach runway where the threshold is displaced and runway threshold lights are required but are not provided. They are symmetrically disposed about the runway centerline at the threshold in two groups. Each wing bar shall be formed by at least 5 lights extending at least 10 meters outward from and at right angles to the line of runway edge lights, with the innermost light of each wing bar in the line of the runway edge lights. And they are also fixed unidirectional lights showing green in the direction of approach to the runway. Touch zone lights. These are lights provided in the touchdown zone of a precision Cat 2 and Cat 3 runway. And they form pattern by pairs of barrettes symmetrically located above the runway centerline. And they are also fixed unidirectional light showing variable white. Runway guard lights. These are flashing yellow lights provided at the intersection of a runway and a taxiway where enhanced conspicuously is needed so as to warn aircraft that they are approaching a runway at an intersection with the taxiway. Usually, during taxi, pilots have to hold, there's usually a place called a holding point that pilots have to hold on to before entering the runway, just to check if there's any traffic in the approach or using the runway. And so the runway guard lights are supposed to warn the pilots that you are approaching to enter an active runway. And now another type of lighting is the approach lighting systems. And the purpose of approach lighting systems is to provide the basic means for transition from instrument flight using electronic approach aids to visual flight and landing by day and night. These are usually lights that are for precision, they're supposed to guide in the instrument landing system. And they provide basic transition from ILS to visual flight by day and by night. So the one we're going to deal with today is simple approach lighting system, which is just simple yellow lights that are that run from the threshold to around 50 meters just before the threshold. These lights consist of white lights on the extended center line of the runway extending over a distance of not less than 420 meters from the threshold, with a row of lights over a distance of not less than 420 meters, forming crossbar 18 meters or 30 meters in length at a distance of 300 meters from the threshold. Basically, these are lights that just guide the pilot on this is where the center line is on the approach, which is simple approach lighting system, that abbreviated as SALS. Okay, for visual distance guided lighting systems, we're going to talk about PAPIs, which is basically known as precision approach slope indicator systems. Their interpretation is basically when you're too high, then you'll have all white, or you can have 3 white and 1 red. When you are on the correct glide slope, then these lights are going to show 2 white, 2 red. And when you are low, when you are too low, this aircraft is going to show maybe 4 red or 3 red and 1 white. And basically, this is the end of our discussion on runway lighting system. And please, if you love our channel, please subscribe and leave a comment for further discussions. Thank you.